Hello students. In this video lecture, we are going to discuss about the problem of deadlocks. Before we actually discuss the operating system's deadlock situation, let us just consider the real-time situation, which is similar to a operating system deadlock. So in the given situation, it is a traffic jam. What we infer from this is that the cars are all have got stuck here because they all want to move to the opposite side. So unfortunately, we have got all the sides filled with the cars when everybody wants to simultaneously move to the opposite side, which means that nobody is going to proceed. So they are all going to be stuck forever fighting with each other with no progress or no movement. This situation is what we are referring as a deadlock. So a basic meaning of a deadlock is that a situation where many processes are caught in such a way that what they need is possessed by the other one and what they need is possessed by these processes. So they are caught in a situation like this, and the only way by which they can come out of this situation is by some intervention by the operating system. Whereas in the given situation, that intervening authority is the traffic police. So he has to force people to create space for some of the cars to move. Once a few cars have uh, cleared out of the deadlock, then all the remaining cars will also gradually get out of the deadlock. Similarly, in actual deadlock also, you don't need to deal with all the processes. If you just resolve the problem of few processes or remove some few processes out of the deadlock, this will create the space for the remaining processes to slowly get out of the deadlock. Now let us get into the operating system's situation. What is a deadlock? So basic reason why a deadlock happens in a computer is limited number of resources. So when the resources are in less numbers than the actual demand, it could create a potential possibility of a deadlock. So we have finite number of resources is the number one reason, and the other reason is multi-programming. So concurrency. This is also a problem of concurrency. So because there are many processes simultaneously getting executed, we may have a situation that many process wants to access the same set of resources, and for that we found mutual exclusion as a solution. But the deadlock does not fit into that solution of mutual based on mutual exclusion, because here the processes need different resources. So they are not competing for the same resource, but they are actually competing for multiple resources. But the problem is such that some resources are available with one process, and the remaining resources are available with another process, and now they start to wait for the resources belonging to the other process. So mutual exclusion has no answer for tackling deadlock. So this is the typical scenario which makes us understand the problem of deadlock. uh, we will look at different ways of executing this, so where there may or may not be a deadlock. So here what happens is process 1 is going to require resource 1. You know very well that SEM8 is for resource request. So whenever mutual exclusion is imposed on the resource through semaphore, any process that wants to access the resource or to enter the critical section for accessing this resource has to first execute the SEM8. Only if SEM8 results in non-negative value, it can proceed to the usage of the resource. So process 1 first demands R1 and later going to demand R2. After usage, it will release R1 and R2. That's what is understood from this example. Now coming to the process 2, process 2 also need the same resources but in a different order. So first it needs R2, after that it is going to require R1. Then it will release both R2 and R1. The question is that will it cause a deadlock? The answer is it may or may not. There is no guarantee that a deadlock will happen or won't happen. It depends upon the order of the execution. For example, in a particular situation, the execution happens in this order. Process 1 commences execution, then it makes a request for R1, and since R1 is currently not accessed by or used by any process, it's allocated. But what happened is that for some reason this process is preempted from the CPU. So it may be because the time quantum has expired or some high priority process or interrupt. For some reason this process has been stopped before proceeding to the next statement. Now then meanwhile process 2 enters the CPU. It also makes a request for the resource which is R2. Because R2 is not yet allocated to P1, it's immediately assigned to P2. So and in this case it goes on to execute the next statement, which is submit of R1, and we just saw that R1 is already allotted to process 1, and obviously it won't get R1. Whenever a resource is not available for a process, it's immediately blocked until the resource becomes available. So P2 gets blocked. Remember, P2 is blocked while holding R2. So R2 is not yet released by P2. That means the SEM signal of R2 is not yet executed, and it's blocked. Now P1 is resumed its execution, and it will go on to make the request for R2 immediately, and R2 won't be available, so it is also blocked. Now what is the problem is that both process will remain blocked forever, even if they are unblocked to test whether they are now executable. It will result in the same situation. There won't be any improvement in the situation, that every time they are unblocked, they will actually expect the resource for R1, and P1 will ask for R2 and P2 will ask for R1, and they will never get it. That is a situation. In fact, they won't be unblocked going by the semaphore logic, because for semaphore logic, if a process has to be unblocked which was blocked due to a SEM wait, only if a equivalent SEM signal is executed, it will be executed. For example, if P1 has to be unblocked out of its blocking state, this has to be executed by P2, because P2 is holding R2. Only if P2 executes SEM signal of R2, this will cause the process 1 to be unblocked, but it will not because it itself is blocked. So there is no question of P2 executing SEM signal of R2. The same way, process 1 cannot execute SEM signal of R1 to unblock process 2, and that is what the real problem which we call as a deadlock. So now we can say that process 1 and process 2 are deadlocked. But this is not the only possibility. There are various other order of execution where a deadlock may not happen. Number 1, in this case both process make the resource request in the same order. That is, process 1 asks for resource 1. Similarly, process 2 also asks for resource 1. Now what will happen is that irrespective of which one commences execution first, it will get the resource 1. So the next process will be blocked for that particular resource, and meanwhile the previous process will be able to get both the resources. So it will use the resource and then will cause SEM signal of both the resource, and the other process can continue. It will be unblocked and then it can continue to execute and get the resources. So there won't be any deadlock. Number 1. If processes executed sequentially without interruption, that is, here the order of the resource request is in conflict only, but still if process 1 continue to execute entirely at least up to this point, that it gets both R1 and R2, and then it may be blocked, it won't affect, then also it won't cause any deadlock. Thirdly, if either R1 and R2 is available in multiple instances or quantities. For example, there are 2 copies of R1 available, 2 instances of R1 available. Now what will happen is, R1 will be allotted to P1 and get blocked, and when P2 starts its execution, it will get R2 along with R1, because now we assume R1 is available in two quantities. So P2 will get both resources and then release both resources. So number of resources is also a very important factor in determining whether a deadlock may happen or not. It's not just the order of request, it is also number of resources. And the fourth scenario is that if resources can be accessed without any mutual exclusion, that means that while P1 is using R1, P2 can also use R1. There is no mutual exclusion. Similarly, while P2 is using R2, it's also P1 is also allowed to use R2. That means there won't be any mutual exclusion. To give you an example of this situation, in reader writer, I say we have seen that all the readers can access the resource without any mutual exclusion. So this is a kind of that kind of a situation. When there is no mutual exclusion among the processes, there won't be any deadlock. And this also proves the point that mutual exclusion is not a solution for deadlock. In fact, it is one of the primary cause of a deadlock. Now we are proceeding into the system model. The finite resources needs to be distributed among a number of competing processes, and there are different types of resources available. There may be hardware resource, software resource. So CPU is a resource, IO devices are another type of resource, files, messages, signals. So we can have a variety of resources leading to even memory is a possible potential deadlock causing resource. So, and we also have to assume that if a process needs a particular resource and that resource is available in multiple instances, then all the instances are equally treated. That means if the process gets instance 1 or instance 2, it should not make any difference. For example, if there are two CPUs available in a particular system, and if a process needs to be executed, whether it is executed by the CPU 1 or CPU 2 won't make any difference in its execution. So they are, because they are identical or equal. Uh, if they are not, if that is not the case, we treat them as non-identical. So if resource 1 is totally different from resource 2, then in fact we should not even treat them as instances. They are more like separate independent resources. Next, a process must request a resource before using it and must release a resource after using it. This is a common understanding. A process may request as many resources as it requires. Okay, so which means that a single process may need multiple instances of the same resource. We can't rule out that possibility. It may for example, memory. So if memory is needed by a process, it may demand multiple memory pieces. Like there are many variable declarations. Each variable declaration can be treated as a resource request. So many resources, instances of the same resource may be needed by processes. And the number of resources requested cannot exceed the total number of resources available in the system. This is a rudimentary restriction, that a process can only demand maximum resources that are available in the system. For example, if there are 4 files available, then a single process may demand at most 4 files, because there are only 4 files to access. And a process may utilize a resource in the following sequence. First, it has to request for the resource. If it is not granted, then it has to be waiting, and it may be blocked. Number 2, once a resource is allotted, it will make use of the resource, and this will consume certain amount of time. It will it will hold the resource for some period of time. Thirdly, it will release the resource so that the resource becomes available to another waiting process. The request and release of the resources may be system calls. They are typically system calls. For example, when you write a printf, when you write a scanf, message queue, shared memory, fork, all that are treated as system calls, and they are also resource requests. So these are some of the examples: request, release, open, close, allocate, free. This is all for different resources. We may make use of different system calls. Now a set of processes are said to be in deadlock when every process in the set is waiting for an event that can be caused only by another process in the same set. If that also indicates that if there is a process which is not part of that particular set, which is holding the resource which is needed by the set of deadlocked processes, deadlock can be resolved easily. It's only when the situation is created such that the demands or the requirements of those processes caught in a deadlock can only be supplied by the same processes which are also part of the deadlock, then only a deadlock situation is found. And we have already looked at this. The resources may be of different types. It can be physical or logical. It doesn't make any difference whether we are going to deal with the physical resource or logical resource. The same solutions will equally work for both type of resources. And deadlock may also involve multiple resources. In fact, in our examples we will see that processes need different resources and get caught in a deadlock. And this is an example to show that even messages and signals may cause deadlock. It's not just the physical resources, even the logical resources may result in deadlock. For example, in this case, process A is expecting a message from process B. Let us assume that this is a blocked message, which means that once this system call is made, process A will be blocked until a message arrives from process B. Same way, process B is also expecting a message from the process A. So this will result in a deadlock because neither process will send a message, but they will both will wait for the message from the other. So a deadlock is going to happen. Now a deadlock categorization. So a deadlock will happen only if certain conditions prevail in the system. It requires certain preconditions to exist in the system in order for a deadlock to occur. So these are the four conditions. Number one, there should be mutual exclusion imposed in the system. So the resources which are being accessed by the processes, they are all mutually exclusive, which means while one process is using a resource, it cannot be accessed by another process, non-shareable. So this is condition number one. Number two, hold and wait. That is, a process which is holding a resource is demanding another resource. Imagine that if I had rewritten that the example I presented as a request R1 and then release R1, then request R2. Then what would have happened is that before making resource to request, it would have released the previous resource. Then deadlock would have not happened. So hold and wait is a situation where a process holding a resource still need another resource. Thirdly, no preemption. The meaning of no preemption has nothing to do with the CPU preemption, but here it is about resource preemption. So if a process is holding a resource, it cannot be preempted until its usage is over. So in other words, only if the process finishes its usage and voluntarily releases the resource can be used for another process or allotted for another process. So the OS don't have any capacity or power to preempt the resource from a process. And we have so far seen three conditions for as necessary conditions for deadlock. Mutual exclusion is necessary. Hold and wait should be there. no preemption should be followed, but these three conditions create the situation for a deadlock. They only make the deadlock to be a potential possibility. But when the fourth condition is also detected, it confirms the occurrence of a deadlock. So circular wait means we already have a deadlock, so we have to resolve the deadlock. So circular wait means that the cycle, that is P0 needs R1, P0 is holding R1 and waiting for R2, and meanwhile P2 is holding R1 and waiting for R, that is the other resource. So which is what we are referring as circular wait. So these four conditions need to happen together in order for a deadlock to happen. This point is important. Only if all the four conditions appear together we will have a deadlock. Even if one of the conditions don't happen, for example, if there is no hold and wait, even if the other conditions are there, there won't be any deadlock. So these are the four conditions necessary for a deadlock to happen. Now we are having a simple solution to see whether a deadlock is likely to happen or not. There is a tool called resource allocation graph. This resource allocation graph is a simple way to represent the resource allocation that is happening in a system at a time. We are going to look at the graph. Before that, we need to be able to understand the meaning of the arrows. So we will look at two types of arrows. One will be process to resource, which means that this process is expecting or requesting this resource, whereas this arrow means that is resource to process arrow means that this resource is currently held by this particular process that is already allocated. So now let us look at and on the point what we need to look in that resource allocation graph is that we have to check whether the graph contains any cycle. If there are no cycles, then that particular situation is free of any deadlock, whereas if there is a cycle, then there may be a deadlock. It's not guaranteed or it's not assurance that a deadlock is already existing, but it is having a possibility of a deadlock. So a cycle in the graph is a necessary but not a sufficient condition for the existence of a deadlock, because we also have the issue of number of instances of the resources. So only if you know that particular point also, we can say whether a deadlock is already present or not. Let us take the first example. So this is a graph in which what we understand is that process 1 is requesting R1 and process 1 is already holding R2. Similarly, process 2 is holding R1 and also it is also holding R2. So in this particular given example, R2 is available in two instances. There are two copies of R2 available. So each process is able to get one of the instances without any conflict in order to share them. So this is a situation where a deadlock may not happen, but still let us see whether a cycle is present. So you can see that you don't see a cycle here, because from P1 you can go to R1, from R1 you can come to P2, but from P2 you can't go further to R2 again. That means this arrow is in the opposite direction, so we can't go back to R2, so it does not form any cycle. Similarly, here also we don't have any cycle, so that is what the conclusion is that this particular example don't have the deadlock. Next, now we have a slightly modified version of the same graph. Now there is a connection between P3 and R2, and this resulted in a cycle. So we can now say that this graph has the chance of a deadlock. This graph has the potential chance of a deadlock. So a deadlock is more likely to happen in the given situation. So theoretically we can say that these three processes are actually deadlocked, but a resource allocation graph is not a certain, it cannot give a certain answer whether a deadlock is there or not. It requires the OS to evaluate the actual allocation of resources and the issues, so that to determine. It's only a theoretical uh, determination on whether a deadlock is likely present or not. This is another example. So you just check whether you see a cycle in this graph. So P1 and P3 are in a cycle, but still there is no deadlock because there are two instances of that resource, and one of the instances is allotted to and resource, a process which is not in the cycle. So only if all the processes holding the resources are caught in a cycle, we are going to be having the deadlock. But in the given situation, P4 is only it is the only resource P4 is holding is R2. So definitely it will release R2 at some point of time, then it will become available to P3. So it will use R2 as well as R1 and will release both. When the resource is released by P3, it will become available to P1. So a deadlock will not happen. Now we have understood the cause of a deadlock and the consequence of a deadlock. The next is how to overcome deadlocks, methods of handling deadlocks. We have got three ways of handling deadlock. One is prevention, next is avoidance, and third is detection. We will look at each strategy, and in fact we can also say ignoring the problem is another strategy. That is, we just don't do anything about deadlock. In fact that is the most popular strategy of the operating systems, because we have seen already in the beginning that in a given situation, only if the execution proceeds in a particular order, we are going to have a deadlock. But that has a very small possibility. The percentage of that particular sequence of execution to happen is very less, and that too if the resources are available in less instance. Only if a single instance is available, there may be a deadlock. So given that a deadlock is a rare situation, many of the popular operating systems don't implement any solution for deadlock, even Windows, because when you want to implement a solution for deadlock, it will be an expensive option. So you have to make a lot of modifications, and you have to run some algorithms which will be an overkill. So when the problem is itself is a I mean a rare situation, it can even be ignored. So that is a fourth strategy, but we are going to consider the three approaches: prevention, avoidance, and detection. So as I mentioned, the ignoring the problem is actually adopted by both Linux and Windows. So it is for the application developer to overcome it. Suddenly when there is a deadlock, and if the process are caught in it, and sometimes, I mean, lot of times we have to restart the Windows operating system. These are all situations of deadlocks. When processes are caught in a deadlock, we will say we may experience the system getting struck. So we will simply restart the system and will come out of the deadlock situation. That is the approach of the Windows operating system and Linux. Now we are going to deal with the deadlock prevention strategy. The meaning of deadlock prevention is very simple. We have already come across 4 conditions for a deadlock to happen. So deadlock prevention simply means that disabling one of the conditions, that is, we may attempt to prevent any one of the 4 conditions from occurring, and thereby deadlock will also be prevented. That is prevention. So the aim of deadlock prevention is to stop mutual exclusion, or hold and wait, or no preemption, or no circular wait. So one of the conditions has to be prevented from happening, and deadlock will also be automatically prevented. Let us now look at the chances of preventing each of these conditions. Mutual exclusion. The simple answer is that mutual exclusion must hold. We can't disable mutual exclusion because there are lot of non-shareable resources that require mutual exclusion to be imposed. We also have seen the producer consumer problem. So while the producer is accessing the buffer, we cannot allow the consumer to access the buffer at the same time. So mutual exclusion cannot be prevented. Next, hold and wait. Hold and wait can be prevented with some modification in the resource allocation and usage. Number one, each process must request and be allocated all its resource at the beginning itself. So while commencing the execution, the process must submit all the resource requirements. Only if the OS is able to find all the resources are currently available, that process will continue the execution and will get all the resources. But if OS finds that only some of the resources are currently available, then it will deny the process to execute. So it won't give any resource to that process if it cannot fulfill all its demands. And this will definitely prevent the hold and wait situation. This is option 1, but it's very expensive option, and is also not feasible because the processors will be unnecessarily holding many resources simultaneously. Number 2, a process has to request resources only when it has none of the resources. In other words, a process must first release its previous resources in order to make new resource requests, which I have already mentioned that if P1 has to request for R2, it must first release R1. So hold and wait will be eradicated by following this option also. But this also both the options have a lot of drawbacks. The drawback of first option I have already mentioned, that it will result in underutilization of resources. So processors won't need all the resources simultaneously. They will just need resources as they proceed in the execution. But allocating all the resources in the beginning itself will keep the resources to be unused for a lot of time. While there are resource processors waiting for those resources, we are going to be wasting the resources. And in the case of the second case, it's not always possible for a process to release the previous resource before asking for the new resource, because some resources has to be used simultaneously. For example, take the case that a process wants to move the content of file 1 into file 2. Now in this case, it must hold both file 1 and file 2 at the same time. It can't release file 1 to use file 2. So it's not always possible to implement the approach. So these are the disadvantages. Resource utilization may be low. Starvation is possible because one process holds all the resources and many other processes are going to be waiting. And so thirdly, some process may have to use two resources simultaneously. So given considering these disadvantages, this strategy of disabling hold and wait is possible but not feasible. We have to look for a better option. No preemption. So no preemption is means that if you want to prevent no preemption, that means that any resource can be preempted from processes. When the operating system thinks that it has to preempt, it requires these resources to resolve a situation or to give it to another process, it has every right to do that. So this is also implementable. This can be implemented at the OS level. But the problem is that not all the resources can be easily restarted. So some resources, once they are partially used, you can't revoke the or roll back their usage. For example, if a process is taking a printout using a printer, and if it has printed as partially, if you want to restart it, you will have to print it all over again. So what was already printed cannot be erased. So some resources cannot be saved and restored later. Even memory case like that. So if you, for example, if a process has used some registers and calculated some result, erasing that will only result in loss of the calculation. It has to be the entire process has to be restarted again. So this is also like it's possible but not efficient. Now we have a solution for the prevention of circular weight also. For that, what we do is that we have to ensure that the condition never holds is to impose a total ordering of all the resources. So the solution for prevention of circular weight is that we have to create a resource ordering such that if you have some resources like R1, R2 and so on, Rm, give a unique number to each resource in a particular sequence. It can be 1 2 3 4 or 100 101, it doesn't matter. They all have to be given a unique number. Step 1, it's going to be like this. So if you have these three devices, just give three numbers to the resources. After that, a process can request for resources only in increasing order, which means that if process 1 demands the resource 1, it can I mean, if a process demands for resource 5, it cannot request for resource 4 or 3 or 2 or 1. It can only ask for increasing order, means after 5 it can ask for 6 7 and so on, but not a lower numbered resource. So what will happen because of this is that if process 1 and process 2 make a resource request in this way, as we had already seen, the request of P2 is now going to be treated as invalid or illegal by the operating system. So it won't allocate R2 to P2. So after it will allocate R2 to P2, but it won't allocate R1 to P1. So this will be while executing this, the operating system will look at this combination and will prevent the execution of the process, saying that it contains a illegal ordering. So but this one is considered valid because R1 is followed by R2, a lower number followed by higher number, but here this resource is having a higher number which cannot be followed by a lower number. One way of executing this is that we have to introduce a SEM signal here. So before making a request to a lower resource, this process has to have a SEM signal of the previous resource. Only then it can make a resource request for lower number resource. But once again, this also limits the processes. So we have to write the processes with this limitation, and it's not always possible to reorder the resource request to always follow the ascending order. So it's also possible, but not the best option. So these are the ways of preventing a deadlock. So the summary of the prevention is that to prevent a deadlock, we have to disable any one of the four conditions. Not all the four conditions needs to be prevented. Prevention of one condition is sufficient. Mutual exclusion cannot be prevented, but all other three can be prevented, but with a lot of drawback. So we are now going to look for the next, and one more point to be said about prevention is that implementation of the deadlock prevention has to happen while developing the operating system. You can't implement this in a new in an operating system that's already developed. This has to be incorporated into the design of the operating system, because these are all design changes. So you can't implement it in an existing OS. That is another drawback. Now we have a different solution called a deadlock avoidance. So the difference between prevention and avoidance is that prevention has to be implemented or incorporated while a OS is designed, so that it won't have one of the four conditions. Either no mutual exclusion won't be there, or Holden weight won't be there, or circular weight. So only if it is implemented at the OS within the OS, it will work. But and also we can't have all the four conditions. We can't allow all the four conditions in order to prevent a deadlock. But deadlock avoidance is a solution where you can have all the four conditions, but still you will try to avoid the deadlock. So it does not need any OS level modification. You can implement it very much on existing OS which don't have any mechanism for deadlock prevention, avoidance is still possible. So how is it done? An alternative method for avoiding deadlock is to regulate the way resources are allocated to processes. So this is the crux of the solution, that you don't make all the precautions you do with the deadlock prevention, but you just be careful while allocating the resources. So the simple meaning of this is that whenever a process requests for a resource, you allocate that resource only after evaluating the situation and finding out that allocation of this resource will not cause any deadlock. So it's not, the processes will be getting their resources only if the allocation of those resources won't cause any deadlock. So this will be followed throughout the resource allocation. So it's like actually the algorithm we are going to discuss under this topic is called Banker's algorithm. So the history behind Banker's algorithm is that the bankers who used to be running the banks in the remote locations, every day they used to have some amount of cash with them. They have to manage all the transactions with that. So some people will come for deposit, and some more people will come for debit, which is either for debiting their account or for loan dispersal. So they need lot of cash with their in their hands. So what they will do is that, but they can't suddenly get additional cash, because at the time they used to be in remote locations. It will take one or few days for them to get a new cash, or they have to wait for somebody to deposit a huge money. So what they will do is that they will not give all the money to few people. They have to fulfill the demands of multiple peoples. So every time a person comes for asking for money, they will consider whether handing over this money demanded by this fellow to him will cause me will still allow us to cater the demands of the remaining customers who are likely to come later. Only if they are able to make a judgment that even if I give this much of amount to this fellow, I can still satisfy the demands of the remaining customers, he will give the money to this fellow, or he will ask him to come by evening when the bank is about to close. If there is still money left with them, they will provide that money. Otherwise they will ask him to come some other day, so that they will bring money from the main branch. So this is the basic idea of a banker's algorithm, that even if they have the money that is demanded by a customer, they may still choose to avoid handing over that money if they make a judgment that it could cause a it will disable them from serving the remaining customers. That's what we are actually adopting under the deadlock avoidance. So even if the resources are currently available, they still may not be allocated to the processes demanding them if the OS makes a assessment that allocation of this resource could cause a deadlock. So that is avoidance. So each process must, but for avoidance to work, each process must declare maximum number of resources of each type that it may need. Only if processes are all submitting the resource demands at the beginning itself, this will work. But unlike the prevention, we don't allocate all the resources at once. Though the processes are expected to submit their demands, the allocation is only going to happen as they actually require. But this knowledge is needed to build the data structure. So if all the processes submit their demands, the OS will create a table of their claims. So these processes are going to be requiring these resources, and so it will make a plan out of it, and that plan is going to be useful for deadlock avoidance. So the resources are not allocated immediately in the beginning itself in the case of deadlock avoidance. A deadlock avoidance algorithm dynamically examines the resource allocation state to ensure that a circular wait condition can never occur. So it always prevents the circular wait. So it does not prevent a other conditions. Mutual exclusion is going to be there, hold and wait may be there, no preemption is also imposed, but only thing that is prevented is forming of a cycle or a circular wait, and that is good enough to prevent avoid a deadlock. The resource allocation state is defined by the number of available and allocated resources. So we are now going to treat the system to be in one of the two states, safe state and unsafe state. A safe state is one in which all the processes that are currently running can be completed fulfilling their resource request. So whatever the available number of resources, that is sufficient to complete all the requirements of all the processes. In that case, the system is said to be in a safe state. Whereas if the number of resources currently available is insufficient to complete all the processes, then it's a potential deadlock. It could cause a deadlock in future. So such a situation is called unsafe situation. So unsafe doesn't mean a deadlock is present. It only means a deadlock might occur. So if you are following the deadlock avoidance strategy, the system will remain in safe state and it will never get into unsafe state. So unsafe state is not going to happen if Banker's algorithm is implemented properly. Now safe state, a state is safe if the system can allocate resources to each process in some order and still avoid a deadlock. So what we actually mean is that there is a safe sequence by which we can allocate all the resources to all the processes. This will become clear as we take some example. So right now I'm just theoretically mentioning the meanings of the various states, but it will become very simple when you look at an actual scenario and the sample evaluation. So a safe sequence, a sequence of processes is a safe sequence for the current allocation state if for each process the resource request can still make can be satisfied by the currently available resources. A safe state is not a deadlocked state. Conversely, a deadlocked state is an unsafe state. Remember that unsafe state doesn't mean a deadlock has happened, but if a deadlock has happened, it is definitely unsafe state. So not all unsafe states are deadlocks. However, an unsafe state may lead to a deadlock. As long as the state is safe, the operating system will continue to avoid the deadlock. So we will be using these data structures for deadlock avoidance. So there is something called a resource vector. Resource vector is nothing but the collection of the total number of actual resources. So how many resources are available and how many instances of the resources are available. So the first value means that how many of the instances of resource 1 available in the system and how many instances of resource 2 available, that is summarized presented in the resource vector. Second is available. Available is the difference between what is the total number of resources minus how many are already allocated to processes. For example, if there are 5 resources of R1 and 3 are already allocated to 3 different processes, then V1 will be 2. So it is the difference between the allocation and the total quantity. So this is available vector, and claim matrix is the one that is representing the demands of the various processes. Already I mentioned that in order to implement avoidance, we need to have the resource demands of the various processes, and that's what is summarized in the claim matrix. So for example, here column 1 means that column 1 in row 1 means that for process 1, what is the demand of R1. Similarly, first row second column means that for P1, what is the demand of R2, second resource. It may be 0 even if it is 0, it will be mentioned here. or it may be mentioned as 1, 2 or 3 or something. So that is how the claim matrix is going to be prepared. And next one is allocation matrix. Again, allocation matrix is out of the claim how many are currently allocated. For example, let's say here the value is 7, here the value is 5. That means that out of the total demand of 7, 5 is already allocated to process 1, but it still have 2 pending demands. That's what we can understand from the claim and allocation matrix. Allocation is actual number of resources currently allocated to various processes. Claim is total number of resources ever going to be demanded by these processes. In other words, no process could make a demand which is exceeding the claim. In that case, it's a illegal request. So this is the maximum possible request to be made by each process. So with the help of it, we have to check whether a given system is safe or unsafe, and whenever a resource request comes, the OS has to make an assessment whether allocation of this resource will result in unsafe state, or it will turn the system into unsafe, or it will keep the system in safe. Only if safe mode is guaranteed, that resource allocation is going to happen. So we will discuss about the algorithm implementation based on these data structures in the next video lecture. Thank you.